Brice Sensibaugh is part of the rookie trio that was drafted by the Utah Jazz this season, and he has probably been the more interesting wild card figure out of the bunch. Obviously, we understand that Taylor Hendricks has more of a immediate defensive impact and upside and a more scripted sort of offensive game. Keontae George is trying to be put into a role where he can be a lead guard potentially, or be put in a situation where he's just a confident shooter off of the bench. Either way, Brice Sensibaugh finds himself trying to find a niche because in college, he was allowed to have the green light at Ohio State like no other. The efficiency did translate over to the G League, but we haven't quite reached that point in the regular season, making us feel comfortable with his ability to be that efficient scorer that we saw in the G League and in college. Despite that, the numbers do appear to be in an encouraging situation as of late, and even though he did find himself in a bit of a shooting slump, things did progressively get better. Admittedly, the Jazz are currently in the rebuild phase, they're currently tanking, and they're just trying to see what the rookies have. So this is a worst case scenario of the best case scenario type of situation where yes, the likelihood of success right now for the Jazz is extremely low, but you really get to see what your rookies can do and what your young pieces can do when they're under high amounts of stress and duress. Obviously, other teams aren't going to pull any punches. They want to go ahead and get the W against the Jazz and get the job done as quickly as possible. With that being said, you find yourself in a lot of situations where the rookies are playing things by ear and just trying to find a way to make things work within the schemes put before them and what they've been able to learn while under your coach, Will Hardy. Brice Sensibaugh stands at 6'5" and roughly 235 pounds and has played in 28 games this season while starting in 11, averaging a total of 17.5 minutes per game, scoring 6.8 points, 3.1 rebounds, 1.8 assists, zero point 0.4 steals, 0.1 blocks, and 1.5 turnovers to go with 39.7% from the field and 29% from three, but 86.7% from the free throw line. Obviously, Brice Sensibaugh had his early debut as a starter get capped off with him pulling down a double-double, which kind of set the tone for what people would expect of him going forward. And though there was not a magnanimous amount of situations that put him in a situation to where he felt like it was necessary for him to do certain things, he still ended up being capable of doing it regardless. Now, you find that in the most recent 5 games, the Jazz had him starting in all 5. In those games, he averaged 25.9 minutes. He scored 11.4 points, 4.4 rebounds, 3.2 assists, zero point 0.8 steals, 0.4 blocks, and 2 turnovers per game to go along with shooting splits of 40.4% from the field, 41.4% from the three-point line, and 87.5% from the free throw line. Those numbers don't quite do him the utmost justice, and so it's important to go ahead and address all the elephants in the room. Naturally, him having started in 11 games, he averaged 26.3 minutes per game to go along with 5.2 rebounds, 2.6 assists, 0.7 steals, 0.2 blocks, 2.2 turnovers per game, while shooting 42.6% from the field on 9 attempts and 28% from 3 on 4.5 attempts. His overall box score plus minus is a -91, which I believe is not a great indicator of who he is as a defensive piece because the effort is certainly there. That said, he does find himself being caught out of position several times and just being a general blow-by possibility for opposing teams. Understanding this, though, you believe that the Jazz have the ability to long-term be successful with the situation that has been placed before them. All in all, he had 2 of his highest scoring games against the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Sacramento Kings, despite losing in both games. Objectively, he isn't the most tenacious defender, and at times he has been pulled because his defense has been quite lackluster. While his overall box score plus minus ended up being a -91, it is not indicative of his ability to properly defend in my eyes. Though he does have many numerous opportunities to get better and at times seems to be picking not to do better or to not necessarily do his job to the fullest, it is still a reason to hold out hope because he is a confident individual. Overall, the numbers suggest that Brice Sensibaugh has not been the most efficient version of himself, and I am inclined to believe that it will progressively get better when you surround him with more opportune shooters and players that can help set the table for him specifically. An important thing that will end up making or breaking Brice Sensibaugh's career, and honestly how things end up panning out as far as his ceiling goes with the Utah Jazz, is going to be how well he can play defense. And not just how well as in how good of a defender he is, but just the general effort and attempts to understand the system. As many people will recall, players like the John Collins of the world came in and were expected to have a very high level of hype. And then around the trade deadline, the news broke where they were very unhappy. They were disappointed to a certain extent. And it pushed them to reach a level where they felt like they needed to go public and just say, hey, he's on the market. He hasn't been reaching the standards that we want. Offensively, the production hasn't been there. Defensively, he's taken too long to get the schemes. Who wants him? Now, admittedly, nobody ended up wanting him because of his contract situation, but Brice Sensibaugh will obviously be more easily let go of in the long term, or easily traded, just considering the fact that he's on his rookie deal. The best thing that he can do is take and follow in the footsteps of John Collins and better understand the system. Admittedly, John Collins is not a great defender by any stretch of the imagination at the moment, or has he been since those reports started to drop. But the longer that he stayed with the Jazz, the better and more effort that he ended up giving on the defensive side of the ball, which made him a more playable person. And I believe that Brice Sensibaugh also can follow in that mold and just be the more energetic kind of guy. He does stand at 6'5". He does have some solid weight to him. Laterally, he does seem to lack at times. He doesn't get blown by too quickly, but at times he could stand to put up a little bit more of a front. A lot of times in pick and roll coverages, there's a lot of miscommunications. He doesn't talk the most on defense, and sometimes it just looks like he's just out there just to be out there on that side of the ball. And that is the biggest thing for that coaching staff alongside Will Hardy needing to just get out of his system, because that was a big thing for him in the G League and back in college. In college, he was allowed to shoot whatever shot he wanted, and he wasn't expected to be the greatest defender because he was at Ohio State and he got the ultimate green light. With the G League team, with the SLC Stars, the expectation was for him to go out of his way to be the greatest player that he could potentially be, to add a little bit of playmaking to his skill set to allow him to be more than just one-dimensional, and then on top of that, for him to mellow out and figure out how he was going to be a solid defender. While the defense didn't elitely come into play, from an offensive standpoint and from a totality standpoint, the numbers were pretty decent. Luckily for us at Basketball Reference, they actually put together those G League numbers, since the G League numbers always seem to be so hard to find. Overall, they listed him as playing in 13 G League games, with 9 of them being starts, playing 27.5 minutes per game, while scoring 19.5 points, adding in 4.9 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 1.4 steals, and 0.2 blocks to go along with a whopping 2.8 turnovers. Now, he did end up shooting 47.7% from the field on 15.2 attempts and 32.5% from 3 on 6.4 attempts. From the free throw line, he also ended up shooting 72.2% on just 2.8 attempts per game. Overall, those numbers obviously don't seem to be the most magnificent ones, but when you consider the fact that he averaged 19.5, almost 20 points, shooting 47.5% from the field, you feel pretty confident, especially when you see the sample size of 15 field goal attempts. Overall, I believe that Brice Sensibaugh does have the ability within his game to take that next step. And really the thing that's holding him back alongside his efficiency is just that defensive effort. We see Taylor Hendricks give it. We see Keontae George having ins and outs and just needing to really step up on that side of things. But all in all, I believe that that's going to be the difference between Brice Sensibaugh being a core piece of this team in the future, or just being a rotation piece that eventually gets shipped out when there's a better asset available. But with that being said, you guys let me know what you think about this rookie in particular. Brice Sensibaugh is obviously one of the 3 that was drafted this past year, and hopefully he does continue to grow. But do you guys think that he could be a big core piece of this team, or do you think that he'll end up in the Ochai Agbaji role where he just doesn't quite pan out as great as they hope, and so they end up shipping him out later on to just fulfill the contractual obligations of any particular trade deal that they decide to go under in the coming years? With that being said, thanks for tuning in this video. It's your boy Wraith Hoops. Make sure to smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on post notifications, and become a member of the channel to help support the content so we can do this every day. With that being said, as always, good morning, good evening, and good night, no matter where you're on the globe watching. Thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.